We'll call the Board of Public Works meeting of Monday, July 15th to order. Number 2, approval of minutes of June 17th. Motion by Mr. Fire. Second by Mr. Bargander. Comments, questions, corrections? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Citizens' comments. Anybody have any comments? I see staff members here, so we'll move on. Number 4, construction update presented by Dean Schiller, Street Superintendent.
Good evening. Tonight I just threw a few pictures together just to kind of show you some of the projects that we're working on. I think sometimes they could probably show a clearer picture than me up here trying to explain everything word for word. But so anyways, a lot of times what you guys don't see is in between our larger projects, we have these miscellaneous projects that come up that we have to address right away. Over on Call Shed by the clinic, the 2 inlets that you see there in the picture where the entrance is, they deteriorated where they started dropping out where we weren't able to allow vehicles over top of them. We were able to get a locate called in, and then staff actually, just because of the amount of traffic you see over there and everything else, we had staff come in early in the morning and get majority of the work done and then pour the concrete around 6:37. So a lot of times when we do have heavy trafficked areas, we do try to accommodate the public in trying to inconvenience them as less as possible. Am I able to do that from here, Tom? Or okay. So here's just another shot on Call Shed. So we can go to the next slide then. So just kind of from the wet spring, we've been trying to catch up on a lot of our drainage issues and landscaping that we had to do. So here's a picture behind the cemetery where we dump a lot of our snow. Down on the bottom end where it comes out by Sawyer Court, we had a lot of miscellaneous stuff to go ahead and fix here. So here's just the picture of some landscaping and hydro seeding. So next picture. And here's just a couple more pictures behind the cemetery there. And then we can go to the next. You can go one more then yet. So another project that we started on last year was a ditch that we did over by the Armory. This was one of those areas that help clean up the drainage going into some cul-de-sacs behind the neighbors there. So this spring, again, we were finally able to get out there, get everything topsoiled and then hydroseeded. And then here on the left, you can kind of see the new hydroseeder that we just bought. Just kind of wanted to bring that up to your attention too, that, the decisions you guys make here in purchasing the equipment come in very handy in us doing our job out here and making things really efficient and I think saving the city money. So this is our new hydroseeder here. We've used it quite a bit already this spring and we'll be using it throughout the whole summer. Next. So here's a miscellaneous ditch project that we did also over on 8th and Lincoln where they were having drainage issues. Again, throughout the year, we'll do these miscellaneous jobs that come up in between our main projects. That was on the north side. That was on the north side of the street.
Okay.
Okay. Next. So here is just a photo. A lot of times you guys don't see. This is part of our Mill and Place projects where we got started this last week. So American Asphalt, who is the contractor for the asphalt paving and the pulverizing, they were in with their pulverizer over on 24th, and this is their new pulverizer just going down the road and pulverizing the asphalt. They also did Hickory Lane, Hickory Court, Fillmore, and Weber at that same time. So once they, if you can go back one, Tom. So once American Asphalt is done, we use our staff where we try to get the pulverized material to the optimal moisture content, and then we come through with our big roller and start compacting it. And then we just rough grade it, and then we leave it sit until American Asphalt's ready to come in and pave. When they're ready to come in and pave, they'll fine grade the road, and their guys do this all the time, so we found that it's better that they come in, fine grade the road. We'll raise the manhole covers up then after that, and then they'll be into pave. So these projects here that they pulverized last week, right now they're looking at paving them later this week, Thursday or Friday. That we should have the binder coat down on those 5 roads. Next. So Farner, they were our contractor, or they won our bid for doing some chip sealing in the city of Marshfield, and then also some pavement rejuvenation. So they were in last week where they put down the GSB 88 on the 3 roads that we had selected, which were State Street between Adler and Schmidt, and then we had 8th Street between Oak and Pine, and then South Apple between 25th and 29th. So right there where you see him putting it down, it goes down and it looks just brown like it shows in that left picture. And then as it dries, we can go to the next picture. When it dries, that's when it starts getting real nice and black. And you can go to the next slide. And so you can kind of see down here, it still looks wet on the left there. It takes probably about an hour, hour and a half where traffic can't drive on it. And then once it's dry, like it shows on the right side there, traffic can go ahead and drive on it. So this pavement rejuvenator, what that is doing, that is sealing the road to prevent moisture from getting into the asphalt pores. So we tried this last year, and we tried a couple more roads this year. So this is something we're trying in our maintenance program to see how it works. We're trying to get to the roads after they've been paved in like year 4 and put this on there. And hopefully this will help extend the life of that road out even further yet. Again, you know, it works differently in every place you go. So we're trying it here, see how it works, and decide if this is a tool in our toolbox or not. So another thing that, you know, you don't really hear or see, you know, we're all doing pavement markings on sidewalks and bike lanes and other things throughout the city. Just to kind of touch base on a few other main projects that we're working on. Our sanitary sewer crew finished up on Schmidt today, and we're going to be heading over to Ives to do the laterals on Ives between Lincoln and Schmidt. And then our mill and place crew, they will be starting on Schmidt hopefully tomorrow. One of the things we wanted to do is try to cut down the duration that, you know, some of those streets have construction. So water has been on Schmidt already, gas has been in there, sanitary sewer. So now our mill and place crew can get in there, and hopefully we can get things wrapped up here in the next month. And it doesn't seem like a whole summer on one street for those residents. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Mr. Bargender.
On the rejuvenator, how long is that supposed to last?
3 years.
3 years, and
Yes.
then would it be eligible for chip seal after that, or?
What I'm looking at doing is the rejuvenator again a second time to push it out 3 more years, and then the chip seal. And what we're hoping to do is that it eliminates cracking and it seals the road, so it just looks and lasts better.
So just about every road that's been paved with blacktop in the last three or 4 years is going to get that in the?
No,
Or is
we're
that just a select few? Is
Yes.
it like a test or what?
Yes, we're doing it on a select few just so we can monitor it and see how it fits in with everything else we do. You know, monitor the cost to make sure it's cost effective also.
I hope it works. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, Dean.
All right, thank you.
Next, we'll have Tom Churchy, city engineer. Tom.
I got to thank you for raising the bar and all these great photos. Now I got to do something better next time. So here we got for our side Central Avenue, Arnold to Harrison Street. This week they are going to put the final lift on the center 2 lanes, and this traffic is scheduled for this Thursday to be moved to the inside lanes, and then they'll begin work on the outside for that project. Wildwood McMillan Connector Trail on Oak Avenue next to the Marshfield Clinic building. Bids are due on July 29th, and we anticipate bringing an award to the August 5th meeting. I got notification that they'll be listing or ranking the TMDL non-point source grant program applications on the 26th. They won't have any dollars with that, but at least we'll know kind of where we sit in the rankings. And then the big one is the McMillan Street culvert extension and slope widening. The box culvert replacement for McMillan Street is scheduled to begin on July 29th, and we'll set the ends of the box on July 30th, and the main box culvert itself will be set on July 31st. And then it should be finished grading and on the 1st and 2nd. McMillan Street will be closed for this work, and there will be a detour, and as we get closer, we'll put a press release into the the public for that. But that's the bulk of just hitting off some of the bigger items from the engineering division.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Bargander.
When was the completion date for the North Central project?
Completion date was scheduled for August 29th, but since they added in a pretty large change order, I would imagine we're probably looking at mid to late September at this point.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Number 5, approval of revisions to parking citation fees presented by Rick Grosma, Police Chief. Chief.
Thank you, and I'll apologize for getting these out to you guys a little bit late. It was my intentions to have them out sooner, but thanks to Dan, we were able to get them in your hands before this meeting. What you have in front of you is, I had handed out before the meeting, is our current parking violation ordinance, and then the new revised one, which City Attorney Wolfgram was able to draft for us for this meeting. The main things that you'll see is the increase in the minimum amount of parking fine. Previously, it was listed as $5 to $40. That was inconsistent with state statute. State statute lists the minimum should be $25 to $100 with those special, as the first one you'll see on this line of, that was previously $30 to $300 is actually $150 to $300, and that would be for like handicap violations, individuals parking in handicap zones without authorization. There's 2 reasons why I'd like to see this ordinance changed and revamped. One is to be consistent with state statute. Excuse me. Again, most of the municipalities that are nearby us are consistent with state statute. The only one that I found that was similar to where we are currently is Wisconsin Rapids. Otherwise, Wausau, Plover, Eau Claire, Chippewa Falls, Stevens Point are all consistent with what state statute reads as our parking violation amount should be. Right now, our parking violations are $15 and handicap is $100. And with this revision, we're suggesting to move the parking violations to $25 and the handicap parking to $150. The second reason we're looking at changing this and kind of the timing of it is we're looking at partnering with a company called Passport. Passport is a parking citation and parking permit automated software program. This is a free program that places such as Wausau, Chicago, Madison, Milwaukee, and all of the UWs use. It's automated in the sense that it uses a cell phone or a smartphone along with a printer. The nice thing is it's free. There's a surcharge placed on every ticket, so really the cost of the software is based on the number of tickets written, and that falls on whoever is issued the citation. So without any revamping, if we go to the software program, our $15 tickets, we would only recoup $12 of that because $3 per ticket pays for the software. So raising this to that $25 would then help cover the cost of that software. So 22 of that would come to the city. 3 of it would still go to the vendor for the software, and we would still be in compliance with what state statute reads as they feel the minimum citation should be is at $25 for those other parking violations, which would be parking within a time zone such as a 90-minute or a 3-hour. It would also be parking too close to a driveway, parking too close to a fire hydrant, parking over a crosswalk, parking on the wrong side of the road. Citations such as that would be those $25 ones, and then, like I said, the handicap would be the $150 one. The nice thing about the software that we're looking at as well is it has as many of you may know, there was a recent federal case saying that it was unlawful to chalk somebody's tires because you're infringing on their right to privacy, or I believe it was an unlawful search or seizure. So, and that actually won in Ohio at the federal level. So this software actually allows for you to use the cell phone and take pictures of where the valve stem is in comparison to where the tire is, and then come back 90 minutes or 3 hours later and actually take another picture. The nice thing is with using the cell phones, you can actually take a picture of the violation itself, parked in front of a fire hydrant or parked in the handicap zone, and that picture prints out on the ticket as well. The software allows you to be able to contest the citation or pay the citation online. There's many other features that I won't get into, but with what you have in front of you, it was drafted by city attorney. There's some changes in the paragraph below the amounts, but those are just to be consistent with the changes in the amounts up above. I would be happy to answer any questions you have on this. Otherwise, we'd look for your approval and passing on to city council.
Mr. Zaleski.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Chief, what parking standing were prohibited? Let's just take 346.53, $25 to $100. Just catch us up, catch the audience at home up on what causes that range, why somebody would be fined $25, why they would be fined $100.
Sure. Again, this is just remaining consistent with what state statute gives. It gives us that range. Usually, the way that our citations work now, and this won't change, is if somebody does not pay their parking ticket within 48 hours, it could double in the amount that's owed. And then if the way that state statute is written, if somebody receives 2 parking tickets within a year, and again, this is if they were written a state citation versus a city ordinance citation, they could be facing up to $100 fine if it was written. Ours obviously don't go that high. They would be 25, and then if they doubled, it would be 50. And if the way that it works now, that's not going to change. Is if it would double and they still don't pay it, we would write a letter to the Department of Transportation, and they would suspend that individual's registration or their license plates, and then they would have to pay the parking fees that are owed before they would be able to have their suspension lifted by DOT.
Anybody else? I do have a couple of comments, Chief.
Sure.
Stopping standing on the highway by grade school. Why is it just grade school? I'm thinking of the middle school and, other areas as well.
I'm not sure. I'm assuming, and this is the way that state statute is written.
Yeah.
My assumption is because of maybe the sudden movement into traffic by that age of child, as opposed to one who is maybe a little more competent in looking both ways and crossing at a crosswalk and maybe knows the rules of the road a little bit more. I think this is just to ensure the safety of those individuals that are preteen, would be my guess.
Okay. I think what we should do is get it out to the schools. I know Grant School, for example. I'm one of them that end up waiting on the street to get into the parking lot.
Sure.
And we should let the parents know in the newsletter or whatever that they could let the people know that you could get fined for that.
Yeah, and I don't think that, in my opinion, that's not for somebody who's waiting with their directional on to turn into a lot. That's for somebody and I have to look into it, I guess, just to make sure I'm giving you the right information. But that would be for somebody who is just, we'll sometimes get individuals, if this included all schools, we'll sometimes get individuals parking at the high school on, is it Palmetto or Apple? Mm-hmm. I think Palmetto by the Tiny Tigers and Greenhouse. And they're parking there so that their children have less of a distance to walk, or so that they don't get caught up in the circle drive, which can sometimes take a while. So that would be in that, if it's somebody waiting to turn into the lot, I wouldn't see that as an issue. But again, I would want to do some research on that before I committed to it.
Okay. Could I get a motion? Mr. Bargender, did you have go ahead.
So, you talked about the software for the parking citations. When would that be implemented?
We could probably, depending on when this was passed.
If this were passed.
If this were passed and to go to council, what I would probably do at council is, in the meantime, between now and the council meeting, I would find out when we'd be able to have everything up and running with that software, and then we would maybe declare a go live date at that point, whether it was, I'll just throw out September 1st or October 1st or something like that. So the goal was to get this either approved or have enough notice to be able to make changes that this body and council wishes. before we got too far along with the software provider.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? I have a motion by Mr. Zaleski, second by Mr. Fire. Comments or questions? All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Number 6, review of options for additional parking on East 2nd Street, presented by Tom Turchi, City Engineer. Tom.
Okay, we've had a request. I remember to do that too. We had a request to take a look at parking around the community center. It sounds like there are some issues with the available parking in the parking lot and in around the library. So we were asked to take a look at what it would be to try to provide angled parking adjacent to the community center. I'll kind of go through two options that we came up with and their anticipated costs. There's no decisions to be made today. Today is more just informational so that you can ask some questions and maybe understand the concerns a little bit more. Then we can go from there. The first option I have is angled parking on the north side only, and it takes and creates 16 parking stalls, which is 7 more than the existing 9 stalls on the south side in the parallel parking location. This drawing kind of provides room enough for a potential green corridor extension to tie in with the portion of 2nd Street directly to the west. This one also maintains some additional green space with the design. And we, as I mentioned, we get an additional 7 parking stalls out of that. The majority of the corridor does remain unaffected. We can basically do the design and maintain the existing curb and gutter through the majority of the project, and it'd be fairly easy to implement. The negatives, there's an offset in the intersection at Maple Avenue, which then makes it a little bit more difficult to cross, but it is would still be navigable. And the cost to complete this work with just creating the bump outs and the sidewalks, not including any type of green corridor enhancements, would be $18,700. Estimated, so it's about $2,700 a stall for the 7 stalls that are gained. If we put in, just like the pink drawing shows a couple, several little concrete steps to get you from the parking stalls onto the sidewalk, that brings it up to about $34,000 and roughly $4,900 per stall. This next option we took a look at was providing angled parking on the north side, but then also maintaining the parallel parking on the south side. This creates an additional 16 parking stalls. We do get slightly a better alignment across Maple Avenue, but it's got the greatest disturbance. We basically have to remove and replace all the curb and gutter on the north side of 2nd Street. It also has the greatest cost to making this type of a connection and making this work. And you do lose some area for trying to mimic the green corridor further to the east from the 2nd Street. The cost to produce this design without any other amenities was $56,000, and it relates to about $35,000 per stall. And so in both of these options, it creates a one-way street with traffic only going eastbound on 2nd Street at this location. So I just kind of want to throw that out there for discussion. Some of the other options are to either just do nothing, or we can take a look at other options too. But I just want to get the discussion started. I have Lori from the library, so that if you have questions on some of these things, we can answer that. And earlier this year, we did add 2 additional handicap parking stalls in the parking lot right near the entrance of the community center. So go ahead. I'll throw it back for questions.
Mr. Zaleski.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing that you may have left out an option was to decrease the hours of the library. Of course not. We would increase the hours of the library.
Mr. Fire, would you like to jump on that one?
No, I mean, the first thing that went through my mind is that certainly there are some in this city that have a real distaste for one-way streets, and this would excite that discussion again, and just to be mindful of that as we go forward in creating these stalls at $5,000 a piece on top of another one-way street. You can imagine the outcry. I can imagine the outcry. So I don't know. I'm in the I don't know camp on this one right now.
Anybody else? Mr. Bargander.
I'm very much in favor of option one. This is something that really is needed down there at the community center library. Parking is at a premium a lot of times when there are any type of special events going on there. And you know, as we increase usage at the community center, we just need those extra parking stalls. Angle parking, one-way street, much safer for people trying to cross the street. You don't have to look, I mean, obviously you should always look both ways, but, you're only really committed to looking one way and make sure there's no traffic. And, backing out gives you plenty of room to back out. That's not a real heavily traveled road as far as I'm concerned. I think people make the adjustment to one way. They have already on 2 blocks either side of Central Avenue. And I'm all for it. I think some type of the sidewalk terrace idea is really good because of the snow. If you're an elderly person or somewhat handicapped or whatever it may be, otherwise you're walking down the street to get an entryway into the community center. So I like those pads or whatever you want to call them. I think they're a great idea, but I hopefully the rest of the board and the council will go for option one. Thank you.
Mr. Fire.
I think if you're going to do this,
Mike, you got your mic on?
and don't want to hear my opinion, you're going to hear it. In my opinion, I get to that library and an area quite a bit, and I'll tell you what, all the parking that you can add to the situation, the better. If you're going to go and make a one-way street with angle parking, then I say make the other 9 spaces on the other side of the road. It makes no sense not to, because eventually down the road you're going to have to do it anyway. So you might as well just do it. If you're going to take this road, and don't worry about that green space. If you get those parking spaces right, they can get onto that sidewalk real quick. Right now, that green space for the elderly is a real problem anyway in the winter. Because now if they park anywhere on the street, they have to walk all the way down to the entrance to get in, because it slopes. It doesn't have so I think the easiest way is if you're going to do it, just do it with the max that you can put on that street. And I understand what they think about one-way streets. If you're going to get complaints, you might as well do it all the way and get a good complaint.
Mr. Wetzel, you want
If
to?
you're going to get it for a good thing.
Thank you. I realize I'm not part of this Board of Public Works, but I am a council member, and so I thought maybe I could throw my 2 cents worth in on this. I am vehemently opposed to either of these plans. I am vehemently opposed to a one-way street. As a person who lives in that quadrant of the city that approaches the library from the east to the west, it's now going to make my approach to that particular location much more difficult. I think that part of the parking issue that we face right now, similar to the parking issues that we face around the middle school, is that there are no parking markings on 2nd Street. So as I went to that very location just last week for a meeting, the parking was ridiculous on that south side of 2nd because people park with space enough for a motorcycle between, but not for a car. And if we could mark it, I think we would resolve some of those issues, similar to how I recommended we do that around the middle school. So I would be vehemently opposed if this came before the council. I would be voting against it because of what I've heard from numerous residents. Example, one resident commented that it's now illegal for her to ride her bike from Maple to Chestnut on 2nd Street because either she's going against the traffic, which would be illegal, or she has to be on the sidewalk, which in that area I don't believe is legal. So there's grave concern. I also had another resident specifically mention to me that they heard that this one-way that we already put in was the beginning of what was going to be many more one-ways, and I said, I will do what I can to prevent that, because her concern, again, is traffic and flow of traffic around some of these areas.
Anybody else? Laurie, did you want to say anything in regards to that?
Here it comes.
So that doesn't work, does it? Didn't he say that?
No.
Yeah.
Presentations.
Oh, okay.
I just want to say that I support anything that brings additional parking because it is a concern. Safety is a concern. We know that people spend their time driving around the lot, waiting for a spot to open, or they leave and come back later or not come back later. And that's not something we want either. We'd rather not reduce our hours. No, I know that was a kidding sort of thing, but that would, I mean, yes, that would alleviate an issue, but it would be an inconvenience for the public. And we're just looking to have more convenience for the public.
Thank you. Mr. Fire.
I'd also like to add that since we've opened this new senior center, we've got a lot more seniors showing up every day. They play bingo. There's a lot more activity at the age group of about 65 to 85. And that's a tough group to walk any distance at all. So the most you can do for them is the better. And if you're able to ride a bike, you should be able to navigate the road that's in front of you, because we're going to get more and more aging there all the time because they're starting to use the center a lot.
Well, I would agree that we are seeing that vision of the complex working together, the community center and the library, that the traffic is flowing back and forth between the two buildings as well.
Okay, anybody else? Tom, do you have what you want?
Well, I guess, is there some direction from the Board of Public Works where you'd like me to try to bring this next week or in 2 weeks to maybe make a recommendation that can be brought forward to the Common Council for discussion?
What's your, Mr. Fire?
I'll make a recommendation that we go with the option 2. I'll go back to my usual statement. If you're going to do it and you're going to tear up that road and make it one way, then get the maximum you can get for parking.
You want to make a motion?
What is,
Can we do
with
that
this being for discussion
it says
only?
discussion only? Yeah. But
just, I want to kind of just direction, I guess.
Okay.
So if there's direction from then I would come back and make a more formal presentation for that.
Mr. Jackek.
Is there, without doing any construction, is there a way to just reline and, I don't know, test it out? I mean, make the street one way, put in some angled parking with some, temporary lines? Go ahead, Tom.
With option 1, if we go back to option 1, you could do that because basically we could take and put cones or something up to create those temporary bump outs and then put pavement markings to make that work. Option 2 doesn't work that way because you actually have to move the north curb and gutter quite a ways in order to make that all fit.
Right. It's the, I hear Alderman Witzel grinding over there from the calls he's going to get and we all might get. I mean, I'm still getting people talking to me about 2nd Street. And it's a one block, one way. And now I'm going to have to say, well, only 2 blocks. And that was only 2 years ago. And 2 years from now, are we going to, I mean, let's just go to Peach. So I'm just curious if we could, I don't know that it's going to change anything, but it would give a few more spots immediately.
It would, and it may also give you some feedback on the one-way street before you do anything major, too.
Right.
Mr. Bargain.
Change is inevitable, okay? As the city grows, we're going to have to make changes. Traffic patterns change, right? Our age of our citizens change. We have to tend to their needs, right? I like the angle parking, like I said earlier. I think we need to keep both options on the table. Thank you.
Anybody else? Dan?
Maybe just to conclude this discussion, I think between now and our next meeting, we'll look at how we would lay out something on a temporary basis. Maybe that is a logical first step, just as a trial basis, and we'll come back with something that would allow us to.
Sounds good. Okay, number 7, reconsideration of disposition of property at 8th Street and Hemlock Avenue, presented by Alderman Zaleski. Jason.
Jeez, okay. All right. Well, I don't have any pictures or a PowerPoint or anything. So I'll paint a picture with my words. So I think perhaps everyone here, with the exception of Mr. Bargender, may understand what's happening here. There is vacant property to the south of Beal Stadium, triangular shape, that's on the corner of Hemlock and 8th, right? Yeah. And Felker, or near Felker. There it is. Okay. The issue was tabled at council last year sometime. I understand it's our discretion to untable anything anytime we want, but I thought, well, let's talk about it here. I talked with Mr. Connect, I talked with Mr. Miller. The three of us had come to an agreement on things, and so I just wanted to talk about it here and look to essentially look to make a motion to approve it here and then send it on to council on what to do. So since we tabled it, we've had a housing study that has described a dire need for available land in the city to build houses on. So here is some. The housing study also indicated a certain price range for some homes. Those in that price range fit here. The realtors in our city have asked for, aside from, and before the housing study, aside from it, after it, and beyond, have asked for more available land within the city. Here it is here. And the neighbors have made some comments towards the fact that they would like to purchase that property should it become available. So seems like the rational solution based upon the housing study, the needs of the realtors, the needs of available housing, and those neighbors would be to hire a real estate professional and list that property and get it moving. I think the eventual intent or the market probably would place houses there just based upon the demand that we're being told that we have, and then the tax base would increase naturally as a result of that. But the first idea here would be to help staff figure out a way to hire a real estate professional, put that land for sale, and then let's get that moving. So I think I said that. I think I said all of it there. No pictures.
Anybody else want to jump in on this? I would just say I agree with getting this on the market. Now, I don't know what type of stipulations, if there's any stipulations. Mr. Witzel, are you have something? It looks like you're ready to say something.
Thank you. Yes. It was actually my motion that tabled this to be looked at again in October. The reason why I said for a full year was because we were in the midst of the football season and we knew that the new stadium was going to be built, but we also knew that there was going to be some sort of development of this particular property at the middle school with, I believe, 2 soccer fields, an expanded track, and no additional parking provided by the middle school. So the concern was what happens, and this was a very large debate, what happens about the parking in the area if we now are getting rid of the football field, but then replacing it with 2 soccer fields and a large track. And if this needed to be developed into some sort of a parking lot, resolve the issue, because there's a lot of cars that were parking there during a football season, I really wanted to see this wait for a season to see what developed. Understand that the middle school no longer needs to put forth a grand plan of what they're going to do with the property, because whatever development they're going to make is less than what was necessary for them to have that master plan. So again, we're left in the dark as a council, we're left in the dark as a city as to what their plan is to accommodate the parking. And this is prime property. I realize and I fully agree, let's get it developed into housing, but I also really understand the concern by the residents, of which I represent half of the people in this area, the ones that happen to be to the west there. I understand their concern with what happens if that parking is gone and now all of a sudden there's additional issues with parking during athletic events.
Mr. Zaleski.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your comments, Mr. Witzel. You categorized it correctly, except for the fact that we'd had a housing study performed. We didn't perform a parking study. So the housing study is what should lead us to our decision. That particular, a valid study that was done, that should lead us down that road to that decision. Unless somebody should buy it and build a parking lot there, but the land should be available and it should be made available by sale.
And it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but it was offered to the school system, I believe, to purchase that property for parking, and they chose not to, I believe. So, anybody got any, Mr. Bargander?
I guess I'd like to see some type of plat for use of this property. You know, what lots, how many lots we can get out of it. It is a triangle, and some of it, you know, probably should be available to some of the existing landowner, especially that 3437B property should probably get that little wedge there. And you know, that's what I'm thinking. You know, I guess I'd like to see something on paper, so we know what we're talking about here. Thank you.
Mr. Connect.
Yeah, I'll just mention, I had a brief memo in the package here that I mentioned there that ideally you could serve 2 lots there off of the Hemlock side, and they're numbered 801 and 805. Those have sewer and water services into them. The long triangle that remains to the east has no sewer available to it, so it would be more difficult to get a third lot on that site. But as I point out in my memo, if we're going to sell the land, it'd be best just to sell it as one chunk, and then a developer could split it however he sees fit, depending on the types and sizes of homes he'd want to put on that. And if he wanted to try to sell off some of it to the adjacent neighbors, then that he could do that as part of his complete package. It'd be hard for us to guess what's the right size for the lots there without knowing how the developer would want to position homes on the property.
Chris, go ahead.
2 questions. One, again, the school schedule. Do we have any idea when they're actually going to develop the track and the other parts? Do we have any idea?
Mr. Miller will enlighten us.
Yeah, I know they had tentative plans to get some kind of earthwork moving this midsummer this year. They're still waiting to hear back from the State Historic Preservation Office on what they can do with one side of the stadium, if they have to do anything with preservation or not. I mean, I understand Alderman Witzel's idea of seeing how the season goes to see before we decide, you know, maybe there is a use for parking with it. The school district didn't seem to want it because then they'd have to maintain it and develop it and put a asphalt on or hard surface it and lighting and all that kind of stuff. So, of course, why would they want it when the city was taking care of all that? I think the intensity and the usage of that site will be significantly less compared to the football stadium. Obviously, you've got the capacity of thousands of people versus a few hundred people. Would they still utilize that spot for parking potentially? But I don't think it hurts to wait to see, you know, how that's going to be utilized as a soccer field and a track. Our understanding is that the track would just be resurfaced. They wouldn't be expanding it necessarily, but they would be expanding some of the grass areas to utilize for track and field events and stuff. So I think, we definitely need some additional lots. I think we're more focused on getting new subdivisions versus, you know, infill lots like this would be. That would be more of our focus. So I don't think it hurts to wait to see how that was something I hadn't thought about earlier, but how this property is utilized this fall. And I think that I forgot the reason why that was tabled for a year, but that makes sense to me. But if you want to go forward with it, I think we could look to list it and look to get some ideas for how to develop it too. So there is a need for housing. So
Somebody informed me this morning that I believe it was on the WIAA site, and they've got the first 3 home games scheduled for Beal State. Don't know what that means, if that's accurate or not. So we might want to be checking into that as well.
And I'd be happy to follow up with the school district tomorrow. I hadn't heard that, but that's probably worth.
That's coffee clutch, so who knows? Okay, anybody else? Mr. Jockett.
Yeah. Damn. Oh, that's right.
Did you bleep?
Opposite ideas. Is there a way, could we put covenants onto any property that we sell in terms of consistency of housing?
Yeah, I mean, you can. It makes it probably more challenging to sell in some instances. You can always put deed restrictions on something. But that's, I don't know if that's what you were going to say, Steve.
Well, yeah, we don't normally do that. I mean, that's not normally who we are. That's usually homeowners associations like Prairie Run or wherever. But I guess what I would say, going back to kind of a combination of what Dan and Ken said, kind of in between here, that I see both points. Normally, I would think that you would say, sell it to someone, let the developer determine how to best carve it up and those types of things. On the other hand, it depends whether you're looking at this as a disposition of property that we don't want to maintain anymore or be responsible for, or if you're looking at it as an economic development and housing tool. If you're looking at it as an effort to spur economic and housing development, then you might want to see a more controlled plan, because you'd like to know that you're getting the best use, the most tax base you can out of it. So I think even if we decide to go ahead and do this, if we're watching future traffic patterns as things change out there, you may want to decide what's our ultimate goal. Just to be rid of the property and let somebody take the best and highest use in their opinion, or to say, no, if we're going to do this, we're doing it to spur housing. We want certain types. We want to make sure there's 2 homes on it. Then you take a more active role.
Chris, are you referring to, I'm trying to guess where you're going with this, but is part of your concern that it doesn't remain an empty lot, that you want houses on there, or?
Well, if we're gonna, if that's the point, that's the point. I don't see neighbors, as much as they talk about buying it. Why would they do that? I mean, you would have 5, 6 people trying to go in, 6 homes. If one moves, or if one decides, well, if 5 of them are going to do it, I don't have to do it. I think that's not a realistic option for the homeowners, even though they talk about that. I wouldn't think so, but they very well might. But I would want to. They're also, their concern is maintaining the value of their home, and you want some consistency in the neighborhoods. We tend sometimes not to think about that, but and maybe we should. Maybe it's just get a house or some sort of structure built there. I would like to see if we're going to do this, a major change, then keep the houses consistent value of what's there.
Mr. Zaleski.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and to those comments into that direction, I mean, I believe the free market will settle this. And if the housing study is true, and if the realtors are giving an accurate story, I don't see any way that housing doesn't come there. It would have to be a whole line of events and people not telling us the truth, and I don't think that's the case. So I think free market will ultimately dictate and decide, is there 1 house, 5 houses, with the shape, the size, the everything. People that are going to buy this are going to do it for profit. So I think that the market and everything we've been told will follow through. So with that being said, I'll make a motion that staff hires a realtor to sell this property.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I'll second that. Discussion? Mr. Fire. Okay, go ahead. Mr. Fire seconds it. Discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Those against? 2 nays? Okay, passed 3-2. Thank you. Pardon? In positive, it passed 3-2. Number 8, approval of a revision to section 13.37 of the municipal code, street lines established regarding responsibility for maintenance of terrace, presented by Dan Connect, Director of Public Works. Dan.
Okay, we have an ordinance on the books that requires the terrace curb or got me again here.
This must be over here.
We have an ordinance on the books that requires the terrace area, which is the area between the sidewalk and the curb, or the property line and the curb if there is no sidewalk, or similarly on a ditch street where there typically isn't sidewalk. From the property line to the ditch has to be maintained by the property owner with regular mowing and so forth. And in the code is a definition of terrace. When we completed the Wildwood McMillan Connector Trail project last year, which runs adjacent to Spruce Avenue between 4th Street and 7th Street, we had some property owners question whether they had to mow the terrace area or the area between the trail and the sidewalk. And we've relied on that same definition in the past, we have similar trails. If you can think of Galvin Avenue from the railroad tracks north to Becker Road, trail parallels that whole roadway, and those homeowners mow that area between the trail and the curb. However, in this case, these property owners were not convinced that it was their responsibility, and a literal interpretation of our definition just refers to the area between sidewalk and trail. So I'm simply asking that we amend our definition of the terrace to include the area between a sidewalk or trail and the curb of the roadway. And if there is no sidewalk or trail, then it further clarifies that it's the area from the property line to the street that is maintained by the property owner. So if you would concur, then this would be this would go to the council as a first reading at the next meeting, and second reading 2 weeks later than that. And then we would send a letter to the property owners in question, just notifying them that the code has been amended to clarify responsibilities and that that mowing would be theirs. We have done a few mowings of this area with city staff once we realized there was this bit of uncertainty in the code. So for the time being, those property owners that are choosing not to mow it, that area is being mowed by city staff. So with that, I'd open it up to any questions.
Motion by Mr. Zaleski, second by Mr. Jacket. Comments, questions? Mr. Jacket.
The way that trail got constructed in with curb and gutter, is there any difficulty in mowing it?
No, I don't believe so. It's level. It's actually narrower turf area than if a sidewalk would be there, because the trail is 10 feet wide. A sidewalk would only be 5 feet wide. So it's less of a burden to those property owners than if they'd have a sidewalk there.
How wide is that terrace actually?
It's probably in the
we didn't get
4 foot range. 4 feet.
Okay, so it's easily mowable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you wanted to leave here tonight and just drive down to Spruce and hang a right, you'd be able to see what we're talking.
Anybody else? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Number 9, recommended items for future agendas. Anyone? Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Bargender, second by Mr. Fire. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Tom, you're still awake.